Maturity models have a long history. From its origin in software development, the 5-level maturity model has been applied to many areas, including process management. At maturity level 1, we can't spell BPM. At level 5, it's become so ubiquitous as to have virtually disappeared, from conscious thought at least. In this video, I combine those 5 levels with the 7 enablers of BPM to give increased analysis granularity and a very practical development tool. This extra level of hard data about BPM maturity means we can make more specific plans to address more specific issues and deliver real maturity improvements. Let's explore that a little more. Process management and improvement is fundamental to good organizational performance. Therefore, we need to be getting better and better at doing process management and process improvement. That's BPM maturity. And so therefore we need to be able to measure and track the changes in our BPM maturity. Now, let's talk about that in this video. Firstly, let's talk about the BPM maturity model. This is based on maturity models, as I said, that came out of the software development world, and it's been modified to use in many places, but here's an example from my good friend and colleague, Paul Harmon, showing how the 5 levels can be used to assess BPM maturity. So at the lowest level, we're really not doing any process management or improvement, not actively and purposefully anyway. And then at level 2, we're starting to do some bits of it. There are some patches perhaps in the organization, some pieces, some parts where people are doing some process work. Level 3, I think, is a kind of tipping point, because now we're getting serious about this. We're doing it on an enterprise level. We're still not perhaps doing it everywhere or doing it consistently, but we've started it. And then at level 4 and 5, we're just getting better and better at it. We're doing it more consistently and more widely across the organization. So at level 1, not much happening. If anything, things are improving, but only because people get in there and do, heroic efforts to make it happen, or indeed just to make the execution possible in the first place. And at level 5, we're at the highest level, and it's almost second nature to us now. We're not even conscious of it on a day-to-day basis. Perhaps it's just the way we do things around here. So they're the 5 levels. Level 1 is the lowest, level 5 is the highest level of maturity. Come back to that in a moment. Now, you may well have seen this video about the 7 enablers of BPM, but they're the 7 things that I know we need to be developing more or less in sync so that we can create and sustain effective process-based management. And I won't go through them all in detail here. As I say, there's another whole video about this, but there are 7 of them. They're all interconnected, so when we start working on any, we'll have an impact on others. So it's not too hard to be developing these, and we need a plan for each of them. They're all equally important. If any of them are missing, we'll have a problem. If we start in this list with architecture, then we need just to make our processes visible. What are they? If we don't know what they are, we can't do much about them. Then we need to know how they are performing, how they should perform, how they could perform, how they will perform, those kinds of ideas about measurement. And governance is about doing something about that for cross-functional processes. And our org chart may not help us much in understanding how to do that. Change is in the middle of the list, but it's fundamental, of course, because that's what it's all about. Mindset is just about developing a process-aware culture so that we're going to think process so that will allow us to do process. Capability is about raising the capability of everyone across the organization to do it, not just a central group, but everyone. And then we do need the central support group, the last enabler, to be that kind of internal consulting company. So these are the 7 enablers of BPM. So we can put these things together very usefully, I think. So you can see here we've got 5 rows, which are the 5 levels of maturity, and we've got 7 columns, of course, the 7 enablers. And you don't need to look at all the details in there. I'll zoom in a moment to look at a couple of them, but we've got a definition of what each of the levels of maturity would mean for each of the enablers. So we start to get some nice granularity. If you want a copy of that diagram, I'm happy to provide it, and the links below will take you to it, or if you can't find it, let me know, and I'm happy to send it to you. So if we have a look, just to zoom in to give you some sense of what's in there. So we're looking here, obviously, at the process architecture and process measurement columns, and just the top 3 levels, 3, 4, and 5. So if we look, let's take process measurement as the example. We can see there at process level, at level 3, higher level processes. Some of them have some measures. It's starting to gain traction. At level 4, we're doing more and more of it. At level 5, it's a systemic system of process performance measurement. So those descriptions in the cells of the matrix they're reasonably cryptic. Space doesn't allow anything else, but they're reasonably useful, and there's more backup material that goes with that to define it. And you could define your own as well, of course. So we've now usefully combined 5 levels and 7 enablers to give us this matrix that we can now use to track the developer. So we could do things like this. So we've got the lower numbers there, the ones with the question marks in them. Let's say that's the current assessment result we've got, and to take process architecture, that's showing us, what do we got? Say it's 1.5. And now, importantly, we can say, okay, we're going to do this again in 12 months. What would we like to score then? What would we like the assessment to be in a year's time? Well, maybe we want it to be 3.1. Okay, so now we know we've got 1.5 now, and we want it to be 3.1 in 12 months' time. So, and we also know what it is you've got to have, what the assessment needs to find to get to 3.1. So we've defined a gap, and we can do that for all 7 enablers. So now we're starting to go from maybe an abstract idea of maturity to something a lot more granular, because we've got 7 measures now, not just one, but we've got quite precise measures of the current assessment, and we know where we want to be, and we know why we want to be there. We know it's realistic. We haven't just said, everything's got to be 5, because that's probably not going to happen in 12 months. So now we're starting to really hone in, and here's the most important bit. Now we can build something like this. We can take each of those maturity gaps for each of the 7 enablers and recast that as a series of initiatives, projects, big and small, to achieve that change over the 12-month period. So now we've gone from some vague, abstract idea that we'd like to get better at process-based management. We've made it a little better by putting some numbers on it, not just one number, but 7 numbers. So there's some granularity happening. Then we've said, okay, here's 7 gaps that we want to close. And now we can say, this is how we're going to close them. So these are projects like any other, and they need to get managed and executed in whatever way we do projects in our organizations. So you can end up with a very practical guide to how we can improve BPM maturity. And of course, we can report that in many different ways. And very nice, wouldn't it, to be able to do that kind of each year, say, to show the trends and what's happening and what's working, what hasn't worked, and where we should be putting more emphasis. And also just to be able to show the rest of the organization that things are improving in a nicely measured way. So let's pull all that together. So enhancing BPM maturity, it's simply about improving our ability to do process-based management. And if we agree that process-based management's important, then obviously getting better at it is also important. So we'd like to be able to do some kind of repeatable assessment, something that's not too onerous or intrusive. So if you think back to that 5x7 matrix, you could print out a bunch of those and just get people to put an X in the square that they think is appropriate. You could do something as simple as that. And if you're asking the right people, with the right kind of briefings and discussions, then that could be very powerful and useful. Or maybe there's some other surveys and other things that you might do as well. But the assessment itself is no use unless it leads us to a targeted, coherent action plan. We've got to actually be able to do something to achieve those targeted levels of maturity. And I do this kind of work often for organizations, and I think for me it's an intended consequence, but often for my clients it's a surprise. But the powerful bonus is the conversations you have about these things. You get a group of people together and you say, okay, on a scale of 1 to 5, how good do you think we are at process governance? And some will say 1 and some will say 4. Occasionally someone might think 5. But even if it's 1 and 3, a huge range, which might mean that it's working better in some places than others in the organization, or it might mean that the people have a totally different understanding about it, or it might mean that we've just got to have some more conversation, but we uncover differences of opinion and the odd argument maybe. But we resolve all of that. And we get to understand why someone thinks it's 3 and someone thinks it's 1. And now we can build a very substantial and rich plan, can't we? That's really embedded with lots of actual knowledge and good plans for the future. So, enhancing BPM maturity is about getting better at process management. And as you know, the purpose of process management is to allow us to make wise decisions about which processes to improve, and then to get on and improve them and prove we've improved them. And that's the purpose of process-based management. That's the game we're in.